Good evening, everyone. This is Mayor Cornell Harvey, along with commissioners for the City Commission. I'd like to open up the Brunswick City Commission meeting dated Wednesday, August the 4th. We will have our invocation led by our Mayor Pro Tem Felicia Harris, followed by myself leading off with our Pledge of Allegiance. So Mayor Pro Tem Harris.
If you would please bow your heads. Most heavenly, most gracious Father, Spirit of the one true and living God, Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to come together on one accord. We thank you for this platform. We thank you for the opportunity to gather together to make the decisions on behalf of our constituents. We pray now, God, that you will lead our thoughts and our minds, that we will make the best decisions for the greater good. We pray now for each and every person under the sound of my voice. We pray now for the city of Brunswick and all that you have in store for us. We pray for prosperity, both in health and in wealth, God. Lead us, guide us as only you can. Protect us and cover us as only you can. In your most holy and precious name of Jesus Christ, we pray and say, amen, amen, amen.
Amen. Okay, I will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome everyone who have joined us. We are doing our meeting virtually due to, everyone knows the pandemic has started spiking again. We're hoping that we get a handle on it, and everyone who wants or needs to get vaccinated will do so. But in the meantime, we will maintain our social distances. We will wash our hands and use sanitizer, excuse me, and we will make sure that we stay vigilant so we don't be added to that number that's going the wrong way. So with that said, as we start our meeting, is there anything we need to add to our agenda this evening? Hearing none.
Mayor.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, we will get right into our meeting. Our first item on our agenda is our update, and we will have an update from Jim Ritchie with Whitman, Regard and Associates LLP to provide a PowerPoint presentation on the progress of transit program update. So Mr. Ritchie.
There we go. I got to hit the unmute button.
Gotcha.
Great. Thank you so much for letting me join you today. It's been a pleasure working with John Hunter and your city manager, McDuffie. It's been really good for the last few months as we've been trying to explore how transit might work in your community. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that will work properly. Let me just get right started, and come on, machine. There we go. This work really was at the initiative of a Brunswick area transportation study planning memo that was done a little better than a year ago. That work identified some possible routes and program management alternatives. It called for a transit system that included the procurement of 5 buses using federal funding that at the time was projected at $682,000 a year. The planning memo suggested the simple service implementation and plan, but importantly, the work didn't identify local operating requirements or sources. And as we've gotten started, that's really key, is we've got to develop a transit program that is affordable for the city of Brunswick. The planning memo also said that the transit system needs to rely on local investments combined with the available federal and state dollars. It's recommended the city of Brunswick explore potential funding partners for the system, such as major employers in the hospitality industry. My point on reading that right now is to say to the council, we think that while the transit system is quite, or could be quite viable, it's really only going to be so as we grow other partners to be part of it with the city. Now, city manager has really helped to define what the key things, the key essential criteria that we really have to look at for the transit system. It's first of all got to be productive. It's got to work for city residents. Running empty buses is not an acceptable alternative. Second, it's got to be sustainable. There's got to be a transit service that in the long term is affordable by the city. In order to reach the transit system, we've got to make sure that we've got improved sidewalks, shelters, and transit hubs. It's got to be a great experience for our citizens. And lastly, we really believe the transit system has to be provided as a partnership with the county, with major employers, the college, the hospital, and certainly the hospitality industry. And so as we've worked on this study, we think there's more work to be done. Now, transit oftentimes starts with people getting to and from work. And so one of the first things we've looked at is where are the jobs in Glenn County, including Brunswick? About 37,000. Now there's 61% of the workers live in either Brunswick or Glenn County, but also that means 39% come in from other counties. Generally, the jobs are concentrated in and around Brunswick and on St. Simons Island. This graphic shows the some of the commuting patterns. And let me talk about them for a minute, because they're very important to understand the transit possibilities. Within the city of Brunswick, there are about 13,500 jobs and about 5,700 workers. Of those workers, about 1,383 both live and work in the city of Brunswick. About 12,210 people come in from outside of Brunswick to jobs in the city, and 4,328 people leave Brunswick each day going to jobs outside the community. Now, this data is from the US Census Longitudinal Employment and Household Dynamics. I think this is 2018 data. Now, one of the key destinations as well and key origins is St. Simons. Now, St. Simons, like the city, has a large portion of people who live and work on St. Simons. About 1,700 people live and work on St. Simons. About 4,607 people travel into St. Simons to jobs, and about 3,641 leave St. Simons each day to jobs off the island. Now, we also looked at Jekyll. The numbers are much smaller. There are actually 24 people who live and work on the island, 320 that live on the island and leave, and 2,093 that come into Jekyll Island. But these numbers give us a good idea of the commuting patterns and are important in planning the transit service. Now, as we talk about transit service, we want the commission to know that we'll talk about two different types. We'll talk generally about fixed route transit. That's buses operating on a fixed route and a fixed schedule. We want to design them to connect residential communities with businesses and services. When we run a fixed route service, the American Disabilities Act requires that we also have ADA paratransit service within 3/4 of a mile of the fixed route. And there are certain other regulations that go along with those ADA services. So with fixed route comes a commitment to the ADA paratransit service. But you can also run paratransit services. And paratransit services are typically described as demand response. On most paratransit services, you'll call up for the next day, and there will be both on-demand and agency-related subscription trips. Another form of paratransit is called microtransit, and it's typically same-day scheduling that's with an application or app-based, so you're using generally your cell phone or computer to make trip requests. And the microtransit really relies on small zones for quick response. And then taxis are an important form of transit and paratransit. Oftentimes, communities will give a user side subsidy for the taxis. This graphic is way too much information to read on the screen right now. So I'm including it in the presentation to provide to you, but I wanted to give you just a little bit of a snapshot of the small urban transit in Georgia. From Albany to Rome, there are a number of small urbanized areas like Brunswick that are running transit service. This data comes from the National Transit Database. It includes by mode, motor bus, that's the fixed route service, and demand response is the paratransit service. So this shows you each one of the results, and you'll be able to look at that in a little more detail. I wanted to, though, to highlight a few things for you. One is Albany, a community of 95,000, has probably the most successful of the small transit systems. It's achieving around 750,000 passenger trips a year and is pretty productive at 20.8 riders an hour. Now, Hinesville, not far from Brunswick, is probably one of the least successful transit systems in the state. It had 19,500 riders on the service during fiscal 19 and only carried 2.2 riders per hour. Those are the sorts of important figures that we want you to realize. We're going to try to design for you a transit system that's highly productive, getting much closer to the 20 passenger trips per hour than the 2. We're not interested in running empty buses. That also shares with you here the cost, the local share cost that the communities are spending, with Albany contributing of local share about $1.7 million a year, and Hinesville as low as $357,000 a year. It takes considerable local public investment to run the transit service. You'll get a chance to look at this in a little more detail. Now, based upon the planning memo, we wanted to put together a transit service that had pretty broad reach, both in the city and the county. And initially, we put together a plan that would have 3 routes. One route from downtown and the south end of the city that would run up to the community college. This is the green route, the hospital, the Walmart, and on out to close to 95 and the businesses there. A second route, the one that's shown in purple, that would have run from the grocery store here on Highway 17, downtown, up Norwich Street, and on to the 95 business corridor. And a third route that would run from the downtown out to St. Simons. You can see the frequency that we had planned on those services every 30 minutes on the first 2 routes, the purple and the green route. And then the St. Simons route would be primarily a commuter service. Now, this service design would have 10 vehicles with 2 spares. The bus shelters and stops would be provided by the city with local city management. We also estimated the cost based upon city employees and identified a need for future transit improvements. We think this service would work quite well for the community. This generally describes the service again in terms of the routes, the number of peak buses. Then we begin to quantify it based upon the miles in the city and the miles in the county. And you can see the percentages that are shown between the city and the county. And we use those trying to distribute the costs between the city and the county. Also in this basic plan, we looked at the operating costs, what revenues might be generated, and we think you really should consider a free service rather than fares, because it generally doesn't generate enough to make it worthwhile to collect the fares. The federal funds, and then under this scenario, the city share would be 878,000, and the county share would be 809,000. As we shared this with the city manager and with staff, we felt like it was truly not financially sustainable, and we did not believe the county would participate, at least initially, at this level. So we needed to look at alternatives that are implementable by the city and a little bit more of Brunswick scale than this 10 bus service. So we looked at 4 different alternatives, and I want to take a few minutes and describe these 4 alternatives to you. One is the one I've just described. We called it the city and county fixed route bus. The second would be microtransit. Valdosta has decided to explore using microtransit for their service. The third option I call demand taxi, and that would utilize your local taxi firms. And the fourth is a scaled back fixed route version that would only use 2 fixed routes, and it would generally cover from the city to Walmart. Now, in each of these, we have assumed a service coverage or service times from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Saturday. Now, we can cut costs somewhat if we reduce those hours and run, say, from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and don't run it all on Saturdays. But I want to make sure you understand that we considered having the extended hours so that it was really usable for people. You'll see the fares. Now, each of the operations could be operated by city staff, the Coastal Regional Commission, who has expressed real interest in helping the city with the service, or a contractor. And then you'll see I have the peak vehicles, the daily revenue hours, and that's the number of hours that a bus is actually on the street, and then the cost per hour. The cost for Valdosta for each service hour comes from their contracts. I'll explain the demand taxi in a moment, how we came up with an estimate of $10 per trip. And then these estimates for at either $70 an hour at the more expanded service or the reduced service at $50 hours at $85 an hour were all developed as build-up using city staff benefit rates and estimates based upon what we think it would actually cost the city if the city operated the service. Let me keep going and work to explain each of these alternatives. Now, microtransit uses generally smaller vehicles. You typically still try to make them lift equipped, ADA equipped, but they're very much smaller than traditional city buses, but typically larger than a Uber or a Lyft type vehicle. Microtransit, you would buy a service or contract with the service to provide an app where people would be able to make their trip reservations. And it generally requires that the citizens sign up online, and for most requires a credit card or other form of payment. Now, it could very well be that you're able to set up a way that some people would be able to come to City Hall or through human service agencies, also be able to use the service without a credit card. But generally, it works best when people have a credit card for the service. So that's the microtransit, and it's essentially you put your trip information in, and within 30 minutes, the vehicle shows up and takes you where you're going. It will work fairly well for customers, but it can also be fairly expensive. Now, the second alternative is one that I wanted to bring to you that's called demand taxi. There are some communities that I have worked with in the Washington, Baltimore area, and it's across the country, but the ones that I've worked with are in the Washington, Baltimore area, that hire a taxi broker who works with the taxi companies to install essentially a credit card reader in the taxi vehicles, so that a citizen or a rider can have this card and can show the card in the vehicle. The way it works is you contract with the taxi broker. The city then distributes the cards similar to this one here, and the customer then directly calls the taxi. And when the customer boards, they pay the first $2. And then for this instance, or this example, we've assumed the city pay the first $10 of the trip. So if the trip costs more than $10, more than $12 rather, then the customer would pick up the difference. But the demand taxi doesn't require a big administrative operation by the city, and it's relatively cost effective through the taxi companies. But I'll tell you, the real thing for demand taxi to work is the city commission has got to trust your taxi operators, because that's really who you're working with and relying to be representative of the city. Again, one of the important things here is that the taxi regulation program oversight would be by a city transit supervisor that we've assumed to be part of the budget. Now, we have done a review of the number of taxis and drivers that are in the area, and we think there's enough supply of taxis to make this demand taxi potentially work. There's the Ultima taxi, the On-Time taxi, Island Transport, J&J taxi, Latino taxi, who I had the picture of. We didn't actually get a count of the number of cars and drivers, and Metro Cab. Now, all of these are not on the street all the time, and we realize that many of these are part-time taxi operations, but we think there should be enough supply. Now, there also could be others that would enter the taxi business or help to support the service, either a non-emergency or an agency transport. Gateway, your Voc Rehab provider, is one that might. They have 10 vehicles. Coastal Regional Commission has 69 vehicles, and then there's a non-emergency medical transportation in Jones Transport and S&S Transportation that might also be involved. Now, we just show here because we wanted you to be aware that there are others that are also providing shuttle services, including the King and Prince Beach and Golf Club Resort, and the Jekyll Island Club and the Westin Jekyll Island provide service, and Sea Island also provides some. But these providers could be a basis for you to use for the on-demand taxi service. Now, we wanted then to develop a fourth alternative. And the fourth alternative is really assuming only the city and maybe a few other key partners help you to finance the service. So it's scaled back to generally be within the city limits, except for one route that would come all the way out to Walmart, and then a loop route that would be serving the college and the hospital area, as well as downtown. This generally gives full coverage and transit availability to all the residents within the city. The service plan would have every 30-minute service from the downtown area out to the hospital, the college, and the Walmart. And then the loop route would also run every 30 minutes. We'd have to have a ADA paratransit service operated as well. And like the other alternative, the bus stops and shelters would be provided by the city. And perhaps we can run some future on-demand service to St. Simons, but that's not in the budget at the moment. So in that alternative, we have estimated the ridership and the costs. And let's go through these again for a minute. For the transit, the fixed route with the city and the county, I was assuming a $2.4 million operating cost. We think we will generate around 238,000 riders. If we did the micro transit, we think the costs are about $1.7 million. And the ridership on the micro transit, we thought would generate 2 to 4 riders an hour. And this is what we think the cost would be on a per rider basis. On the demand taxi, we looked at ridership from other areas to develop our estimate as to what you might be able to achieve. We think the costs, and the costs are variable because we don't know for sure how many people would actually take the service, but the cost would be between $500,000 and $700,000 a year, we think, accommodating 30,000 to 60,000 riders. And it really depends upon how many long distance trips are taken, but generally your commitment is always $10 a trip, at least under our estimates. And then the fourth alternative would be city only fixed route bus. Now, I think we'd have 2 fixed routes. We think we'll be more productive on the service at 10 riders an hour because we're only in pretty well populated areas where we think we can gain ridership. Overall, the cost of the service would be about $1.3 million a year. My guess, and it is, I think it's an educated guess, but my guess is we would generate around 138,000 riders at a cost of about $9.20 per person under the fourth alternative. Now, before you, well, these next couple of slides are to help you have some comfort in my estimates of the ridership and why I think you will get good ridership on this service. Now, small urban transit ridership really depends upon the demographics. We get much higher ridership in minority and low-income neighborhoods. People that don't have an automobile are also often heavily reliant on transit. And especially we will get higher ridership where we can have a good tie to a university or university system. Now, you're also going to get higher ridership when you have decent walkability. A grid street network with sidewalks, like Brunswick largely has, is going to generate more ridership and a pedestrian-friendly environmental work. And then most important, I think, is service quality. The bus has to come frequently enough that people will choose to use it. The Hinesville service, which I shared with you as one of the least successful services, the bus comes every 90 minutes to every 2 hours. It is so infrequent to be almost to be unusable. It's also, the service has to be quite direct. You've got to have a span of service early enough in the morning and late enough in the evening for people to use it. And the service has to be dependable. Those are the things that in my mind will drive your ridership. Now, the data at the top of this slide just shows the population with the service area, the percent minority, the percent low income, and the percent zero car households. And you can see Albany has the highest percentage of minority, highest percentage of low income, and highest percentage of zero car households. That's why Albany really has a much higher ridership transit system than the others have. It's also perhaps a little bit why some of the others don't do as well. So then we compared the data for the different alternatives that we're suggesting to you. Now, the county as a whole has 79,000 population, 32% is minority, 18% low income, and 7% zero car households. When we do the routing that had the city and county bus, this is all the way out to 95, we have about half of the county in the population. It's higher minority because we know the city generally has a higher minority population. When we look at the two alternatives that are strictly in the city of Brunswick, which the microtransit and the demand taxi would be, our numbers are a little bit higher at 58% minority and 33% low income. And then the last alternative, which is mostly within the city, has, we think, 19,000 people that could use the service. 63% of that population is minority, 31% low income, and 17% zero car households. That is really why in alternative 4, I think we would get pretty strong ridership. This just shows a little bit more on the riders per capita. Are the riders per capita, are the riders per person that we're projecting, in fact, likely for you? If I'll go first to the other small urbanized areas. Albany is achieving about 10 riders per person, or 10 trips per person in the area per year. Hinesville down at a half of a ride per capita per year. Now, the way I estimated the ridership is based upon my estimate of what I think the productivity can be, and then convert it to a ride per capita. Under our alternatives, we think would be about 7 rides per capita under alternative 1, and about 7.04 rides per capita for alternative 4. And you can see then a range. We don't know really how many people are going to ride. If we got as high as 10 rides per capita, such as Albany had, this is the ridership level that we would achieve. If we're at half of that, at 5 rides per capita, this is the ridership level. The whole purpose of this slide is to help give you some confidence that we have ample reason to believe we get good transit ridership with the Brunswick service. Now, let's finish with a financial comparison of the 4 alternatives. The city-county service relies on both the city and the county to participate, and a city share of around $880,000 a year. The microtransit requires a city share almost as much per year, although the range depends upon how much service you operate. The demand taxi would be a less expensive way for the city to get into the public transit business, and we think would be between $250,000 and $350,000 a year. And then the 4th alternative, the city-only service, is about $635,000 a year, we think, operating cost. Now, put the big star next to this 635 and realize it needs to be other partners as well that might be able to contribute to the cost of the service. Perhaps the college, perhaps the hospitality industry, perhaps the hospital. Others might be able to participate in the cost, and that might be a key factor in your decision as to whether you're able to operate the service. Now, lastly, I wanted you to see what you have right now in federal funding that's available for this service. You already have a grant that is through the FTA CARES Act. That's 100% federally funded. That's available to you for 5 buses, shop equipment, and security cameras is the basic grant that you have available to you currently. Now, you've also have approved in the CARES Act grant, $206,000 for planning. That's what you all are paying me with at the moment. And $700,000 is available for operations. So these funds here at the top are already approved. Now, the urbanized area receives an annual appropriation through the 5307 program that you haven't used, that has been available for some time. Generally, those funds are available for 5 years from their appropriation. And that's what's shown here are the funds that were available from prior years. $657,000 from 2017 to up to $699,000. Come on, screens. That's available. Now, these funds can be used for 5307 eligible projects at an 80% basis, 20% local. They can be used for planning. They can be used for buses. They could be used for transit centers. They can be used for maintenance, tools, and facilities, but they can also be used for access to the transit system. They could be for bus shelters, pedestrian walkways, read that, sidewalks, landscaping and streetscaping, benches, receptacles, and even streetlights are specifically mentioned in the circular. So one of the reasons perhaps to run transit is that you will be able to have some federal funding to support other local investments in the streetscape and in the community. But that's essentially where we are on both approved grants and things that might be possible. And I've gone on too long, but I wanted to make sure we mention what the next steps are. We've done the city council briefing today on August the 4th. We want to also brief the county commission and make sure that they are aware of the plan and have the opportunity to participate. We planned community and stakeholder meetings, which we had planned for August and September. And I suspect they may have to be delayed because of the COVID situation. We'll try to see how we can advance those. Now, we think this needs to have, or we'll have further study reports that'll help you in your deliberation. But we really suggest to you that the city deliberate about the service alternative and the fare and service levels in the November to December timeframe, so that service could be implemented perhaps as early as July of 2022, which is the beginning of fiscal year 23. I've gone through a lot of information, and I'll be glad to answer your questions, or we can also have follow-up calls with any of the commissioners that would like to talk with me about this study.
Hey, Commissioner, any questions for Mr. Ritchie?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a question. This is Commissioner Williams. Has any survey been done or talked to anyone in the public in general about whether or not they would use a service such as this?
No, sir, we haven't. And we wanted to make sure we first had a good ideas on what the service might be and for the commission to hear it first. But surveys of the public are something we absolutely can and should do.
Also, the I guess the cards that you were talking about, how would those be distributed? Would that be distributed through the city? Or would that be something that a person would have to apply for at City Hall, or how would that work?
The taxi cards would be, in our view, would be distributed through the city. We want to distribute them to city residents, and folks would come to City Hall and apply. It also could be, though, that you would use other human service agencies within the city that would help to distribute the cards. All you're trying to do is get basic information about the customer, and then they get the taxi card and they're able to call on the taxi on their own. And there doesn't have to be other dispatching or other involvement by the public agency in making that work.
And that could also be done online possibly, and that distribution of cards be sent out on a mail out once they go through the process online.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question. This is Commissioner Martin. I think if you go back to page 5.
All right. Here we go.
Yeah, okay. So the slide or the map to the far left where you've got 12,210 people coming into the city. And of those, a certain number stay, a certain number leave. So the people, that number coming in, which is a very large number, do we know if they need, I mean, if they're coming in their own vehicle, do we say they need transportation at that point? I mean, if that number of people are coming in, should we assume they already have transportation? And it's
Yes.
just the 4,328 that need to, well, added to the 1,383 that need to do something?
Yeah, what we've assumed is that we have, or that we're not expecting. Now, well, if I were in downtown Atlanta and I was running an express service into the city, I'd be trying to accommodate this. We weren't trying to design to really accommodate customers from the outside coming into the city. What we're really trying to design for is this 1,300 people that live and work in the city. A little bit of the people that live in the city and work in the surrounding area, because it's 4,328, while the arrow points at St. Simon's. It's really intended to show going outside the city. Really, though, a lot of that 4,300 people are going to work on St. Simon's. And so it's really these two groups, 1,383 of people that live and work in the city, and this group of 4,328 Brunswick residents who work outside the city. It's really those two groups that we were trying to design the service around.
So the 4,300 that theoretically go off or out of the city to work, rather than having a route that goes literally onto St. Simon's, if we had a transit stop that was, let's just say, at Lanier Plaza, which is at the Brunswick end of the causeway, and we partnered with some of those resort services and folks that need to go to St. Simon's, the Sea Island, other jobs that might be over there. Is that part of the formula? Is that we would have a single point where the buses from those companies could theoretically pick up riders on the mainland and get them over?
Well, first of all, you have that today, where the resort actually runs, I think it's at 8:30 in the morning, a shuttle that does exactly that. But it's not all of this of the employers on St. Simon's. But that is precisely what we had in mind, is bringing them to Lanier Plaza bring all of your buses to the Lanier Plaza so people could in fact use a employer shuttle to get to jobs on St. Simons.
So theoretically, those are the entities that we need to partner with as
Yes,
far
ma'am.
as sharing the cost. Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. It seems a very expensive venture, but I guess the onus is on the city and the county really, and those employers to make sure their employees and residents know about the availability of the routes and can get that ridership up as high as possible.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we, are looking at alternatives other than fixed routes, is because is that the best method and most cost-effective way to meet the needs of the community? And, with today's technology, it may be that we look at something less fixed than just setting up routes, but have something more on demand. And that's why we're looking at those alternatives.
Yeah, and focusing on peak demand, peak times, peak locations, all of the above.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Now,
you.
one of the first things as we got into this is we realized this was expensive as well. And that's really why we've taken time. We started on this work last October or so, and we've taken our time through this because we wanted to make sure that we really fully shared what the costs were, so we don't get you into something and then have costs that are not affordable by the city.
Mr. Ritchie, this is Mayor Harvey. Did you all consider just running the buses at peak times to figure out the peak times that people are trying to get, let's say, getting to and from work? And also, in other words, instead of running a bus every 30 minutes, maybe run one every 2 or 3 hours during the peak times that we know that people will be using?
Mayor, we really haven't. I mean, my own expectation from seeing small urban transit work is that we can, you really can't tailor very well to peak times because people are going to work all the time. And if we only run from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., we just won't get as high a ridership as we can if we operate an extended period. Now, that's absolutely possible, and we can scale it back further so that instead of that 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. that I showed in the hours, we scale that back to a much shorter period. That's all possible.
Well, I think if we let's say we start out with every 30 minutes, and then if we can see how it goes, we can really hopefully tailor it down or ramp it up to whatever it needs to be, maybe. So that might be something that we can look at. That I know it's only a small, minute savings, but it still can be the public perception of it can be really, really great.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I'm sorry. I have one other question. Is the thought came to my mind is how can we leverage the transit stops with the location of affordable and workforce housing? In other words, if we have those clusters that we know where they are, there's a lot of workers in that housing or that community area that need transit. Have there been other communities that have been very intentional about their transit routes and leveraging that against that workforce housing and some of those workforce housing developments?
Absolutely. There are other areas that have been quite intentional. I'll give you one in Greenville, North Carolina, for example. They built a transit center as the hub for their transit system. But at the same time, they built an affordable housing complex directly next door to the facility. And I am very much a strong advocate of the tie between affordable housing and transit. Now, for your service, we worked very closely with John Hunter to make sure that we were identifying your affordable housing communities as they exist today and make sure the transit route has good access to those communities. We also used a data set that is maintained on affordable housing complexes, any place that actually has a HUD contract. We used that data to also plot it to make sure that we were really working on our routes. And we haven't physically picked the stop location, but all of the routes are intended to be very close to your affordable housing complexes.
This is Commissioner Harris. My question is, how much conversation and input has the potential corporate partners had in this planning? How much conversation and input has the potential corporate partners had in this planning?
That's where we need to start at this point in time. We have wanted to make sure we first have alternatives that were viable and brief the commission. And now is the time to begin the engagement with the county and with the corporate partners.
Okay, and I asked that, of course, and I think you may have made mention of it, because as I'm looking at the numbers going out of the city of Brunswick, going into St. Simon's, how much of the 4607 is our 4328 included in that amount?
Yeah, it's we have our of that 4328, my estimate is about 2,500 are going to St. Simon's and from the city. And it's very, and you all already know it. It is the largest single place where people from Brunswick are going to jobs.
Mhm.
So is the balance, the 2,093, then potentially going to Jekyll? And how can we further take those numbers and actually know where they're going? Where are they traveling to?
We have, I have it by zone. We create a little matrix in the zone, and we can really say what we think the numbers are individually. But the work locations outside the city that are significant are north of the city. North of the city towards 95 is where you've got a lot of the jobs as well. And the jobs on Jekyll are significant. They're not little, but I think the largest job area that your folks are going to are St. Simon's. The second is north of the city up to 95, and Jekyll, I think, would be a third location. But we do have that precise data, again, from the LEHD information to share.
Let me ask this question.
And so, can I finish mine?
Go ahead, go on.
So the cost comparison as we contemplate moving forward with this and doing our bidding for those partnerships, we should would you recommend, or how would you recommend moving forward as far as highlighting the cost comparison of what those corporations may be expounding now versus what it would benefit them to partner with the city to provide that transportation in conjunction with them or in partnership with them, as compared to what they're expounding now in expenses to transport their employees to their places of work.
Well, one of the things that at least we I think, have concluded is that in order for transit to work on to St. Simons for a public sponsored route onto St. Simons, we really need the county to be at the table and work with it. I think Commissioner Martin's idea of we're bringing the folks to Lanier Plaza and the Jekyll employers are picking them up and bringing them at their cost. I think that's really it is not an inexpensive proposition to run the buses over to Jekyll Island or over to St. Simons Island. I'm sorry. It's not an inexpensive proposition. And I think we're better if we can leave or make that as a partnership, but part of the partnership is the private sector still providing much of the service for their employees.
This is Commissioner Williams. I have this question. You said of the 4328 that's leaving out of the city, going to the islands for employment, you said 2,500 of those is what you guesstimate would ride. What's the number of people that are actually, how are they getting to work today? What's the number of people that's being transported by King and Prince or whatever other companies?
When we did at least the phone contact with the other companies, we wanted to know about their service, not necessarily on the number of riders that they were actually carrying. So my guess is you might have 100 or so people who are using the existing service, but that's only a guess. I don't have more confidence in knowing what that number would be because we don't have real ridership data from the employers. But I think most of the people that are commuting to St. Simons are either going in their own vehicles or are carpooling with others to get to St. Simons.
So then that's my question. Then how would it be a benefit to an employer to have to pay for someone now to come that's already carpooling, for instance?
Well, it's really, I'm confident that employers on St. Simons are challenged to get employees as well. And this is, transit is a way to help them to gain employees. That's the real benefit to the private employers there, is they're able to get an expanded workforce that's able to get there reliably because of the transit system. Many of the employers will look at it from that basis. If I can get people to drive their own cars today, then I don't need the transit if they're already doing it.
I think that's true, but also I think if employees know that they can save by parking their vehicle at a certain point and transportation to and from is free, provided free, I think they would probably take that service just as well.
Mayor, one of the things that we really find is a link between affordable housing and transportation. And that oftentimes housing and transportation are the two single largest expenses of low-income families. And when we can make transportation truly available so you don't have to buy the gas for the car, or maybe you don't have to have a second car for the household, it really means substantial other discretionary funds that the family can spend on other things. And that's really the benefit of transit for low-income people, is it means they don't have to make those large expenditures for transit. They're able to use those funds for whether it's food or whether it's other household expenses.
So were we to move in this, would there be potentially in the future federal funds to subsidize the transit cost as far as the riders? I work for Internal Revenue Service, so of course we have different things that we handle for the employees. But there are certain benefits or opportunities that the employees have to have their transit costs subsidized. Is that something that's potentially something that we could potentially look towards or look for in the future if we were to do this to help to subsidize the cost or subsidize the transit costs for the different persons that, or go to
Yeah.
corporations for that?
Yeah, Brunswick is a small urbanized area and gets formula funding each year, or is appropriated formula funding each year at roughly $700,000 a year. Now, multiple ways that we can use that $700,000 a year. We can subsidize the transit operation, or we can do something like the user side subsidy I was showing for the taxi operation. The federal funds can also be used for supporting volunteer transportation programs as another way. I haven't seen it as frequently where we actually underwrite directly other transit cards, but we could. But it's that $700,000 of federal funding that we're really trying to figure out how to utilize in this. And there are multiple ways that we can make that work.
So what does that three-legged stool look like if you're thinking about the transit cost being supported by the formula funding on the federal side, city taxpayers, and then other corporate sponsors? Do you know what that ratio of participation looks like in the end?
Well, my own expectation is that it's the best partner that you will have will be the college. And we have met, John Hunter has met a couple of times with folks at the college. Now, I'm not ready to tell you they're ready to write a check, but I think they are your best potential partner. The medical center may be a second potential partner. I think the Jekyll or the St. Simon's employers might be but I also really wonder whether they will be as willing a partners as either the college and the medical center could be for you.
Thank you. That was good information to hear. And I would think too that to the degree that we can support their needs as well, they would feed into the program.
Yeah, and maybe I should go to the mapping of the route. Let me actually go there. And this is very intentional that both of the routes go through the college. And it is with, coordination with the college that we ask the question, would you be interested in the service, and explored where some of their housing is and where some of their needs are. And we also began to explore whether a student fee might be a way to also help to finance part of that. But we really think the college is the most likely strong partner for you. And John Hunter, you're the one that has had those conversations. I don't know if you want to jump in at all.
Yeah, just sorry, just to augment what Jim's saying. They were very interested in connectivity through the campus and through areas where their students not only live, but where they work. And we also had a a class participating with us who's doing some student surveys to try to learn more about what their potential ridership might be as well.
I think that's a good move. Spread the joy.
Yes, I think we have done a survey in the past. It's been about almost 7 or 8 years ago. So it's primary is do another study survey of the college students, and also I'm sure there probably would be some nonprofit here in town that would do one basically to gauge a number of citizens who would like to get to the hospital, get to Walmart, get to other places too, that we are actually targeting stops for the routes. Any further questions, Commissioner, as we move on? If not, Mr. Ritchie, well, thank you for your update. Appreciate it very much. It was very informative, as Commissioner Martin said. This whole, as we move forward, we are learning and learning pretty quickly, and also we are trying to do our due diligence as we try to see the feasibility of having this public transportation come to our area. So we appreciate all you do, and please keep us informed. We will ask for updates as time go on, even more frequently. So we appreciate it.
And I would
Mayor-
just add one
Yep.
last thing before you sign off, Mr. Ritchie. Thank you for the information. But what do you see as the primary next steps for us as a community?
Well, I was hoping we would be able to have actual community meetings and do that with surveys at the same time. And I'm worried that now we may have to put that off a little bit longer until it is safe for everybody to gather. But I really think we've got to do more community outreach, make sure that this is something that citizens in fact would be interested in. I think we need to do further outreach to the college and to the hospital. And I was hoping that that would all be able to occur in August and September. And we would be ready to come back to you in October with a package so that you would be able to begin deciding whether you want to include it in your next year's budget. And we know we've got money for the first year, but we just don't want you to jump into it without a reasonable expectation of being able to pay for it going forward. So the COVID situation may set us back again. But I think the real next step is the community engagement that we need to do.
I think you're right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Commissioners, one last pass. Anything else anyone want to say? Hearing none. Again, Mr. Ritchie, thank you again for our update. And again, as I said before, we will be asking you to give an update a little more frequently as we move forward.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Talk to you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, commissioners, we thank Mr. Ritchie for that information, that PowerPoint presentation that gave us a lot of information on our mass transit program. We'll move right along to our next item on our agenda, which is an appointment. This is a board appointment. It is appointment to the tree board. This is to fill the unexpired term of Cecilia Lampkin. She had resigned. Her term ends October 1st, 2021. So we have one name that's here for consideration, Ms. Joanna Faith Lee, who lives at 1902 Holly Avenue in Brunswick, Georgia. We have received in your packet a resume, all the information on Ms. Lee. And I'm sure that the president of the tree board, or the chairman of the tree board, has also talked to Ms. Lee as well. So commissioners, as we look at the resume and consideration of appointment
No, I'm okay. Hang on there.
appointment of Miss Joanna Faith Lee. No, wait, I think I got this a little wrong. I seem like we have two, Naomi, please help me out here. Is Ms. Lee replacing Ms. Lampkin, or Ms. Lampkin just resigned?
Ms. Lampkin resigned and she would like to be appointed as the replacement.
Oh, Ms. Lee would like to be considered as replacement. Okay,
Yes,
all right, thank you.
you're welcome.
Commissioner, what's your will and pleasure on Ms. Lee? You have her a resume and all her information concerning to be appointed to the tree board.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion, got a second to appoint Ms. Joanna Faith Lee to our tree board. Are there any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposes? Hearing none from the opposing side, that motion carries. Thank you, commissioners. Okay, our next item on, Madam Clerk, please notify Ms. Lee and let her know, and also the chairman of that board too as well.
Will do.
Okay. Our next item is item number 3, consider approval of July 21st, 2021 regular scheduled meeting minutes. It's in our package. Please take a second or two to peruse, and I will entertain a motion if there's no
I'll
change.
make the motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second.
I got a motion, got a second to approve our regular scheduled meeting minutes. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposers have the same right. Hearing nothing from the opposing side, I believe the ayes have it. That motion carries. Thank you. Item number 4, consider approval of financial reports as of June 30th, 2021. Ms. Mills, our finance director, will be presented.
Okay. You have before you the June 30th financials, which is obviously year end. And so we are 100% through with this fiscal year. However, there are a lot of audit adjustments that will still be made. So these are by no means final numbers, but should give us a fairly good indication. For the month of June, we had expenditures over revenue of $1.7 million. However, we made the pension contribution, which was around $1 million in June. We also had an extra payroll in June, and we also had, that was a regular extra payroll. And we also had the retention and the other payment that was made in June. So that's accounts for the majority of the overage. And of course, this is a slow month for revenues coming in. For the year to date, though, we're showing revenues over expenditures of a little over $2 million. There is a cash balance of approximately $7 million. Our local option sales tax for the month of June as compared to last year at the same time, we were up 34.66%. But year to date, we were up 17.42%, which also included that big adjustment, audit adjustment that was made a few months ago. Without that, which was like a $260-something thousand, then we would have still been up on our loss distributions for the year by 13.2%. So we did have a much better year than we had anticipated and lost receipt. Title ad valorem tax, we were up 6.24% for the month of June as compared to last year. But year to date on title ad valorem, we are up 31.51%. The second page has SPLOST 6. And look at the first column, shows how much has been expended on SPLOST projects. But the third or fourth column over, I guess, that shows how much the city has actually expended. So far for SPLOST, we have expended a little over $10.5 million. The reason there's a difference is because we have received reimbursement. We've gone in jointly with JWSC and Glenn County on a few projects, and we paid the bill and got the reimbursement from them. So you'll see the reimbursements we've received in that second column. I have amended the budget a little bit because of the $328,235 that we had given to the SPOS 6 fund for the fire engine overage, and I think the fire department has some overages for the building, and so did the multipurpose center. So I've made those adjustments, and there will be a few more coming on, but if you'll see, the amount down at the very bottom in the center, it shows we budgeted tax collection 13.8, that we actually collected 15.7, which gave us an overage total of $1.8 million in collections. I've paid back, like I said, the $328,000 on the general fund. So that still gives me an unallocated overage of $1.5 million, which the city manager had sent me some information, and I will adjust for that next on your next report, where we have put some more money in sidewalks and drainage, I think. But we haven't, so those unallocated funds are 1.5 million plus the aviation tax and plus the interest of earned. So we're looking at 1.793. But as I said, some of that has been allocated since to streets and or sidewalks and storm drainage improvements. We have cash on hand in SPOS 6 of $5.7 million. The next page has SPOS 5, which I think has something on the agenda for tonight. With those excess funds, we have a cash balance there of 1.356. Norwood Street Commons, there's been no activity for this fiscal year other than the interest that's been earned on those funds. We've earned $286. No expenditures paid out. So we have a cash balance on that fund of $335,000. The Roosevelt Harris Multipurpose Center, you'll see, we have total inflows showing at $425,000. The main thing to note there is grant money, we're showing $189,000, transfers from the general fund of approximately $220,000. I know you're aware that we had budgeted a lot less than that. We had budgeted $100,000 there. And so, you know, we're $120,000 over budget in the amount that we transferred over. However, that was mostly due to the fact that you'll see we took in grant money of $189,000. Our budget was $250,000 for grant funds, which because of a slowdown in the usage of that facility, and that made us get less money in the grant revenue. So we were short about $60,000 in grant revenue. So that and higher cost on some of the food and all has contributed to those overages. And but we have started to get a lot more money here in the latter part of the year from the grant. We did some adjustment there with the CRC, and they are giving us some more money. We have been able to buy a few things, some equipment over there that they gave us some extra money, extra grant money, but it could not be used on our everyday expenses. So, you know, it looks like we bought some equipment, and we did, but we had to use that money for that type of expenditure. We couldn't use it for operating expenses. Next page is sanitation fund. You'll see revenue, 2.2 million, expenditures, 1.7 million, for an operating income of $463,000. We have cash on hand of 497,000 in the regular account, and then we have in a restricted account for the landfill, $194,000. Sanitation bills run about normal of about 132,000 for trash pickup. I know there's been some work done between Ms. Edwards and Ms. Gravely, between sanitation and the property tax billing, and they are coming to some conclusions. So hopefully we'll see some more money coming in there. They have found some properties that were not being billed on the property tax. And so those will be straightened out. And, you know, it's not as easy a task as it sounds like, because you can't just compare one list to the other between what Republic is picking out because of the parcel numbers and the way some of our properties are split, but we're anticipating seeing some additional revenue there. Stormwater utility fees, we had a net revenues over expenditures so far of $338,000. There is a cash balance in that account of $485,000. There were no animal control expenditures, traffic control expenditures. There was in the recreation department, $3,093 was spent on a new ice maker for that facility. And we also had $750 in subsidized fees that we paid in the month of June. Last page is the Roosevelt Lawrence Center. You'll see expenses for the month, $36,000. Year to date, $108,000. The monthly expenditures were a little more because you'll notice I allocated the pension in the month of June when we paid it. And that was an additional $9,000 that we don't normally see in the monthly expenses. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain those.
I have one question regarding the theft that took place at the Howard Coffin Park, the Aquatic Center. How is that gonna affect the finances?
Okay, I didn't hear the first part of your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the theft that took place, the breaking and entering of the.
Oh, the theft, I'm sorry, okay.
Yes, the theft. How that's
Well-
gonna affect everything.
I have not heard anything about that. That was, I mean, the county had it under. I don't know what repairs are necessary. I don't, Regina, do you have?
No, I haven't heard anything from them on that. I read about it in the paper, so it was not something that they've communicated to us. I will touch base and see if, what the situation is in regards to repairs that are necessary.
Thank you. I think that would be important because obviously we need to be, or they need to be, whomever at this point needs to be preventative minded, but then also repair what needs to be repaired that was damaged. As far as policies and procedures go in handling cash at that location, whose control is that under?
County.
That is not the
That's
city,
fair.
that's the county.
Yeah, that's their money.
So I would be curious to know if they need to change their policies and procedures in light of that theft and not
Yeah,
be,
it seems like it was a weekend because, they did have a substantial amount of cash on hand. That was one of the things I thought about, but with it being a weekend, they may have held the deposit till Monday or something like that. Seems like it, so, but that will be handled, through the county's finance department.
Any further questions for Ms. Mills on our budget finance report as of June 30th?
Not a question, Mr. Mayor, but I want to make this comment and I asked Ms. Mills about this and Ms. Mills during our finance committee meeting about the number of participants that we're having in the recreation. And the question was, the numbers look real small for the number of children that we have in the city that are participating in recreational activities. So I was just kind of concerned as to what would we do to kind of boost that and make that more relevant?
Well, I know the city manager probably answered that question as well, but I think as we move forward with the city taking back or reverting back to having operations at Coffin Park and programs, so to speak, it may not be an issue. And again, it may be issue as in how we structure our program as well with that. I think most people who are using our program now, I mean, using the county program with us subsidizing it, is based upon what type of sports. But I imagine you were talking about how many overall the whole year have used it. And that's something that we can really figure out.
Yeah, that too, but at one point, we probably had 8 or 9, maybe 10 baseball teams in the city. Now we only got 8 participants, 8 children participating in the whole scheme of things.
Yes, we need to go back and look at the programs that we will provide for that. And it may take some advertising, some it'll take us a while to build the program up, I think. Commissioner, Mayor Pro Tem, you're a sports-minded person. What do you think?
That's something that we did address in Finance Committee meeting.
Okay.
With the low numbers that we saw that the city is subsidizing as far as city participants. That was a flag, that was a concern, but that's something that has been on the steady decrease the entirety of this contractual agreement. And those are things that were previously noted regarding the decrease in what was being done on the county side of it to address the pattern or the decreasing in the numbers, because it's not something that we just saw. It's just at the point that it's at now. But I know I've had conversation with Regina regarding the status and how we move and what are some of the things that she's contemplating. What are some of the things that the community is contemplating, and with the baseball and those other teams as such, we have to look at how we are going to fill in the gap with the programs that we offer as a community or as the city. It is definitely a need. We do need to move and push for getting our recreation back, but we need to proceed. I won't say cautiously, but we need to proceed consciously, so that we can make sure that we are affording what needs to be afforded to our community, because there are traveling teams now that are dissipating the numbers that we had in different programs and stuff. But there is still a need. There is still a cry from the community that they want the city to get its recreation department back, and wants the city to get recreation back under its OSPRI because of different challenges that the city residents have for transportation, for economic reasons, cost, affordability, all of those things. And so we are addressing all of those different factors so that when we move to do this, we can move to do it effectively and not just a knee-jerk reaction, but we're doing it effectively. So, we're looking at those things that is being consciously addressed.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on our finance report as of June 30th?
Yes, we should be celebrating. We ended the year very strong. I'm very, very optimistic about going forward. Thank you.
Yes, we did.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes, it is. All right, so I'll entertain a motion, please.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion second to approve our finance report as of 30 June 2021. Are there any further questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Good job.
Anything from the opposing side? Hearing none. I believe the ayes have it, and that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, City Manager and your staff, and Ms. Mills. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes. All right, let's move right along. All right, item number 5, consider approval of renewal of additional flood insurance. Ms. Lynn Veely, who works in the finance department, will be presented.
Yes, sir. Good evening. It's that time of year again to renew our additional flood insurance policies. And in your packet, you will find a flood insurance summary, a spreadsheet that was prepared by McGinney Gordon that shows the specific location addresses for the additional policies. We have 3 property locations that have additional flood insurance insured by the National Flood Insurance. And then we have 7 specific properties that have additional flood insurance through a Lloyd's of London policy. If you will look at each of the columns, it shows the different aspects of the coverage, and then the last 2 columns does a comparison between last policy term and this policy term. The National Flood Insurance policies increased $321 in total, which is an increase of 5%. The Lloyd's of London policy increased by approximately $1,500, which is also an increase of 5%. So the total increase for these additional flood policies is $1,820. I also included in your packet the GIRMA coverage details. Back in May, the Commission approved the GIRMA renewal, but I always like to show that in addition to these policies, because we have $10 million in flood insurance coverage through our GIRMA policies, with a $50,000 deductible for property and a $1,000 deductible for mobile equipment. The NFIP and the Lloyd policies are additional flood coverage. So in total, the city through GIRMA has insured property of $29,745,200, and that includes our mobile equipment. The specific flood policies give us an additional $4,281,500 in building coverage and $506,200 in contents coverage. So with the combined of the GIRMA and these additional policies, the city has $14,787,700 in flood coverage. I presented this packet to the Finance Committee, and Fred was not able to be with me, but he's here tonight by telephone. Commissioner Williams had asked the question of how these policies would work together, say in the event of a hurricane and we had flooding, and would one be primary and one be secondary? And I'm going to let Fred speak to that. My understanding is from our conversation that we can basically, as we file claims, we can make these policies work to our advantage. And Fred can explain that possibly a little more.
Yes, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor, these individual policies serve a couple of purposes. One is if we were to have a major event where there was catastrophic damage to a number of the city buildings and mobile equipment, which is covered under the GIRMA policy, and the total damage exceeded $10 million, then we could use these policies to pay the claims for the buildings that are covered by these policies to the limits that these policies offer for each building, so that the $10 million limit that GIRMA gives could be used to provide coverage for buildings and mobile equipment that aren't insured by these individual policies. Another scenario where these policies would come into play is in the event we had minor flooding that just affected one or two or a few of the buildings that are covered by this policy, the deductibles here are significantly lower. The deductibles apply separately to each building and the contents, but in the event you had a few inches of water in one or two buildings and the claim did not exceed $50,000, these policies would step in and pay that loss subject to their deductibles.
So
Thank you, Fred.
if you can, Fred, if you can answer this, what will the deductibles on these policies that we're speaking of tonight? I know the Germa is 50,000, and the ones that we're talking about tonight is how much?
It's shown on the schedule that you have. It's for the three NFIP policies. The deductible is $1,250 for each building, with the exception of the detective building on Mansfield Street is $5,000, and that deductible applies separately to building and contents. Then on the Lanier Boulevard, 1430 Lanier Boulevard, the Howard Coffin Rec Building, the deductible is $10,000. On the police station, it's $10,000, and on H Street, it's $10,000. And the deductibles vary based on trying to get the best bang for the buck in terms of the most premium credit for the least deductible. And then the deductible for the fire station at Gloucester Street is $1,250, as well as the admin offices on Mansfield is $1,250, and then the listener house is $10,000.
Okay, any further questions for Fred? Okay, thank you, Mr. McGinty, for giving us the update, and thank you to our finance committee too for having those questions and for vetting those situations. So, thank you, commissioners. As we look at what Ms. Veely's proposed, I think it's going to cost us about $1,500, a little more than $1,500 for an increase, which was 5% on one and also 5% on the other, I guess. So and that equal to about $1,500. This has been in our package and we have gone over. It has been approved by the finance committee as well. So, Commissioner, if you will and pleasure, I will entertain a motion for approval of this increase in our flood insurance.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second for approval of the additional renewal, additional flood insurance. Any further questions? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposes? I believe the ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGinty, and thank you also, Ms. Veely, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we move right along. Item number 6, consider approval of fiscal year 2021-2022 congregate meals and adult daycare services contract. Our city manager, Ms. McDuffie, will be presenting.
Yes, Mayor, I will start the presentation. I do have Ms. Wimes, Darlene, who runs the center, who, has intricate knowledge about how the center operates and certainly does a great job to assist and help our seniors all throughout the year. And she's on the call, so she will be able to make comment and answer questions. The information that I presented on the summary is a little bit off. They sent us a correction after that. It says the total contracted amount is $217,331 for this contract. And this, of course, is the contract to run the senior center and provide meals in the adult daycare services that is supported through the CRC. They did send us a correction, and the total budget or contracted amount changed by $30,892. So it's $248,223. And the number of units, instead of it being 14,000 estimated meals, went up to 16,234 meals. And I'm going to try and share my screen to show the budget for the senior center going forward for this year. As you can see, comparatively, the budget is pretty much the same. The total for the meals is $248,000. It's only showing $2 difference between last year and this year. The total for the adult daycare is $185,000 and roughly the same as it was estimated for last year. The funding from the Older Americans Grant increased by about $25,000 to $254,000 for next year. And the amount which resulted in the amount from the city being less, instead of it being 172,000 estimated, it's $144,000, but the total budget is the same. It's $433,000 for the center's operation. And basically this is the, of course, as I stated, the contract that we do every year through the CRC. And with that, I'll allow Darlene to have any comment or answer any questions.
I got one question. Didn't our finance director say something about the city issuing some funds, transferring some funds to there?
Well, the thing is, last year, of course, with COVID, the numbers from the grant were down. And so because of the operation costs, not, you know, some of the costs that we have are fixed costs. And because the grant numbers for reimbursement were down, we had to subsidize a little bit more than we normally do in that fund to cover those expenses. But that was kind of in this line right here. Instead of it being the 172 that's shown, we had to do $220,000 was the amount that she showed on the finance report.
Okay. Okay. Any questions, commissioners, on where we're going with our senior citizen center?
I have one question. Is that number going down because of lack of participation because of COVID with the total cost that you had? 144,000, I think it was on your screen.
No, actually, as you can see, the total budget is still the same. So no, that is not reflective of any decrease of participation. It's actually because we anticipate the grant funds to be higher and the city's requirement for the match to be lower. But the total budget and the anticipation of, you know, people is roughly the same.
I would just like Darlene to chime in on her reflections over really the last year, and then moving forward, if there are things that need to be changed or tweaked. Are we meeting the needs? Are there other things that we can do?
And yes, and before she says that, I'd like to just say they have done an excellent job throughout this period of, you know, providing safe environment for the citizens. We've not had any excessive, you know, COVID concerns. So I want to thank her for, you know, all the work that they've done at the center. But Darlene, can you unmute? There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Our count is down a little bit, but it's coming up. We have more people that are returning now to the center. And we do have a large participation by the county as well. And so we're trying to maybe address that with the new county administrator so that we might be able to get some help from the county. But we do provide a lot of services, good services for our senior citizens, this community. And we have a really good staff to help out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When we appreciate all that you do, because that is a huge service within our community. And I think y'all have an excellent reputation and a heart and a desire to serve that portion of our population. So thank you.
Thank you.
Arlene, what is the consensus of city and county participants over at the center?
Right now, I can't give you the exact figures, but I can tell you we have more county participation right now than we do city.
How are they getting there?
We have a large number that drive in, but we also have the Coastal Regional Commission does the coastal coaches that brings them in and takes them home.
How many ride the coastal coaches? Do you know?
I'm going to say about 20, 25 people.
How about your cost over there with inflation, your food cost and whatnot? Is that a problem?
We do have some food costs that have gone up. We're trying to watch that real closely. But of course, too, we have, our staff costs have gone up as well. So that's kind of where we have more additional costs.
So you feel like that your budget is good for right now?
Well, it was estimated on what our expenses were from July through December of 2020. And I did get in contact with the CRC and ask them for a change in our unit cost. So they gave us a change. They increased our unit cost by about $5 per unit.
Good. Do you need some more magazines?
Sure, anytime.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you, Ms. Wimes. Thank you, Darlene. It's so good to know that we have this community-minded facility here right in our community, and that so as we think community, even though most of our residents, the people who utilize are in our county, it's still in our community. So we just thankful to actually have this service for our community. So thank you for running that show very well. Tip-top shape. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioners, are there any questions? Well, Ms. City Manager, anything else you'd like to provide?
No, just, I will get with Darlene on, the number of county residents and, keep up with that information so that we can use, when we speak with the county in regards to service delivery.
Right. I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Coastal Regional Commission to provide senior services.
Second.
As motion second for the approval of the congregate meals and adult daycare services contract with the CRC. Any further questions or comments?
I have one question or comment. Did our attorney have an opportunity to look at the contract and make sure that everything was in order?
He's on board. Let's see. Yes.
I'm here. This CRC contract is the one we've used year after year, and there didn't appear to be any significant changes to it. So it looks appropriate in moving forward.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll tell you, if you looked at that contract, there's not a thing in there it didn't cover. I'm gonna tell you, it is absolutely unbelievable how inclusive it is.
Yeah, I read through it too, John. It
is unreal.
Cover quite a bit.
I'm telling you.
Quite a bit. All right, any further questions, comments, commissioners? If not, I entertain a motion. We got a motion already?
Got a motion.
Okay, well, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposers have the same right. Hearing nothing from the opposing side, that motion carries. Thank you. All right, we're at item number 7. Consider approval of Glen Brunswick 911 Services Agreement for external entities. Our chief of the fire department, Mr. Randy Mobley, will be presenting, maybe. Are you on board, sir?
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Okay, thank you.
Jekyll Island Fire Department desires that dispatching and call taking services from our joint 911 city county 911 center. Presently, the way it works is if somebody from Jekyll, a visitor or somebody that lives there makes a phone call, it goes to a lot of times our 911 center, because of towers, the way they're set up. And then our 911 center calls the state patrol department over there on Jekyll Island. Then the state patrol in turn calls dispatch. And what they want to do is take the state patrol part out and let our 911 center directly dispatch them. And it'll save them a lot of time when they have fires and medical calls. We think it's important to do that. And they are kind of part of our community, but to be able to do that right now, they need, we can't really just, we don't have enough dispatchers for them to have their own dispatchers, so they won't desire to use our, the Brunswick Fire Department dispatchers. And we're willing to give that a try. We did make some changes to the contract that they had came out with. Mr. Corey, did you have any, did you get that done? And those, you know, I wanted to add in there about they're going to Channel 2.
Yes.
I heard there may be an issue or two with that, but there's several ways they can do that. And we really don't care how they do it, just as long as we can't have two big emergency scenes from two different fire departments going on at the same time.
Right. So we did add the change. Fire chief had indicated that there might be some changes he'd like to see in the contract. So we did make those revisions between the Jekyll Island Authority, the county attorney, and myself. We took a look and drafted some revisions. After a couple go rounds, I think we got it to language that we're comfortable with. The Joint Public Safety Committee, their dispatchers had a little bit of concern about the switching of the channels, but we can, and I think we will still address that with the SOP. It's basically just that if they are going to abide by the recommendations of what the fire chief has said tonight, but in the event that they need to exercise some discretion over how the channels are being used on the radio system, they'll have that discretion. So I say all of that to say that we've incorporated our fire chief's concerns into the contract, and we've coordinated with the county and the Jekyll Island Authority to get those revisions done. I think I sent them out to the clerk sort of late in the process, and I believe she was able to get those into your packet. There's also one small minutia that had to be changed today. It was just one word had to be replaced with another. So what will happen is I believe this contract is being taken up for consideration by the county commission tomorrow night. So if we approve this one as to form, we'll be fine. And then the county can approve, once the county approves tomorrow night, we'll use the copy that they execute to disseminate and get signatures.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. You know, we always want to help our community partners as well. Jekyll Island County, you know, we want to make sure that we cover everybody, keep everybody safe as much as we can. Response time is very crucial for our police and fire, and we realize that getting there a minute earlier can mean all the difference in life or death. We understand that. So I appreciate you want to help fellow firefighters, fire departments, and our community as well. Commissioner, so this is being brought before us. It's been vetted by our city attorney, our fire chief, and so what's your will and pleasure with this?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to offer a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
I got a motion, I got a second for for the approval of this agreement for external entities with the Brunswick Glen 911 services. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. All right. We're now down at the city attorney items. Item number 8. Consider approval of the second amendment to the amended and restated Oberthal Conference Center Memorandum of Understanding. Wow.
Yes. So what you have before you tonight is I think everyone is relatively familiar with the recent development regarding this property. And if you recall in the past, the MOU between the city and the county, when the county conveyed the property, which is identified herein as the Winchester Building property, when that was conveyed to the city, there's an MOU and the deed contained a clause that stated if the city did not use the property to build and construct the Oglethorpe Conference Center, the city would pay, upon demand by the county, the fair market value of the property. In discussions with some of the county leadership, the city manager and the county administrator, myself and the county attorney, there was some discussion that because of the vote recently about the infeasibility of the project and that the project has essentially was now voted down by the citizens of the county, what to do in terms of how to move that forward and whether we could work out some arrangement that would allow the URA and the city to pursue development on the entire piece of the property without the concern of that clause having to pay back the fair market value right now. So the city owns the property, and it, obviously would be best to be advertised as a full piece of property for development. So what this does is it amends the MOU and it stays the requirement of the city to pay the county the fair market value of the property for 2 years from the effective date of this amended agreement. The belief behind that was if we stayed it and we were able to advertise it as an entire piece of property for development, whether it be the URA, I believe the URA will begin advertisement. There might be a mechanism through that redevelopment that would allow the city and county to, meet the requirements of getting just compensation back to the county for their conveyance of the property. So that's what this does. It essentially gives the green light for the URA to be able to advertise the entire piece of the property for redevelopment purposes, while allowing the city and county to have some flexibility in how the city will compensate the county for the property at the end of the day. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to field them now.
But Mr. Corey, would that price or that number be at the value now, or would that be at the value at time of development?
I don't think it's locked. The value has never really been locked in. Just in the original MOU, it said fair market value as determined by an appraisal. And if there was a disagreement, the city and county could each get their own appraiser and meet in the middle. So there hasn't been a value set on the property. It would be, but I would say that it would likely be the fair market value of the time that there wasn't something selected to be developed on top. And again, this leaves it open to, not open to interpretation, but it leaves the ability for the city and county to come together to find sort of a creative mechanism to provide the county that compensation. So whether it be if the property, for example, was offered for redevelopment as a whole, someone sought to purchase the property, you could look at that, and if they purchased the entirety of the property with the plans to redevelop, the county could be paid out of the purchase price whereas the city would, you know, take the purchase price of or the URA would get the purchase price of the property, pay out the county the fair market value. In the alternative, if there's a long-term lease for a, you know, a residential or commercial development on the property, the county might get a prorated share of whatever that lease arrangement would be. You know, it's sort of a deferred cost at this point, to see what development might best fit the property, and then the parties can come to the table and say, okay, here's how it should be broken out.
I think that's a good situation because it lets us just be open-minded to what the development might look like, and to be nimble in how we might assist in that public-private partnership as a whole. So
it really removes a burden from the URA's ability to seek redevelopment on the property, so that they can say, we own it, or, you know, the property is owned in its entirety, and that's what's being offered for redevelopment without strictures or, you know, the county and city government sort of looking over the top. And then they can the URA would ultimately come to the city, of course, and say, here's what we believe is the best development and how we envision, you know, the deal moving forward. And then we could all, you know, work out that consideration at the end.
Yes, my question is that of Commissioner Williams and the determination of the value of the property and the value being the prospective value or projected value or the current value.
It would be the undeveloped value. I mean, it would be the raw land value. It would be.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
I'm sorry. If I was unclear there, I apologize. It would be the raw land, undeveloped, vacant lot that you see today.
Okay. Now
I'm not going to pay them.
You kind of scared me before I was.
No, we would be required to pay for what we received. You know, the compensation for what the city received.
Thank you.
That helps me
ma'am.
too.
Sorry about that.
Okay,
and I will note that this does allow for an extension of the 2U period if necessary.
Great.
And last point would be, you know, in the past, there have been monetary values placed in in these agreements. You never know what could happen in 2 years. And that monetary value could unduly burden somebody looking to come in and redevelop. You know, if you have to meet that value, you have to get that value. It could be a problem.
Okay, commissioners, we've been kicking this can down the road quite a bit. Maybe just one more kick will be enough to get us to where we need to be. And hopefully kicking in that goal. And we all win. So that's what we're looking for, a win-win.
I'll make a motion that we approve this Second Amendment to the amended and restated Oglethorpe Conference Center Memorandum of Understanding as presented.
Second.
Motion second for the approval of the Second Amendment to the amended and restated Oglethorpe Conference Center MOU. Is there any further questions or comments?
We sound real constitutional with all these amendments going on.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
When
No
you have
further
a project that dates back to 2001 or 2003, there's a lot of amendments that come out of it. So hopefully the last.
Yeah, hopefully this is the last kick of that can. Hopefully, as I stated before.
Well, yeah, and I think hopefully we're in a good position economically.
Yes.
To move forward.
Yes. Well, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposes? You have the same right. Hearing up on the opposing side, I believe the ayes have it. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, this community. So we will move forward with what we need to do with making sure that we all, this whole community will benefit from what we have done here and what we'll do in the future with the overthought track. All right, Item number 9, consider approval submitting comments in response to the Georgia Department of Transportation proposed rule 672-11-04.
Yes,
City Attorney,
yes. Commissioner Kaysen should have particular note to this. A couple weeks ago, he sent me a newspaper. Actually, it was the last city commission meeting, I think. And there was a public notice in there of the Georgia Department of Transportation's intent to amend certain rules and regulations regarding right-of-way. So we took a look into it, and right around the time Commissioner Kaysen noted it in the newspaper, GMA sent out an email advising cities and counties, well, GMA obviously was dealing with counties, of these proposed amendments, and that they may have quite a negative impact on municipalities. I sent over the Rushi Patel, obviously with GMA, sent this email out. I sent it to the city manager and stated, I think it's something that we should look into, submitting comment. I think GMA is going to come out with probably their own comments on it, and something we probably should pursue. So I added it to the agenda. I did not have specific guidance from GMA at the time, but I had an overall understanding of what was going on. In cities and in counties, obviously we have our rights of way, and we have utilities that run their fiber, their cable, whatever it might be, through our right of way. And we typically are paid a fee or a rate for that usage by the utility company using the city right of way. Under the current law, there is what is known as essentially telecom wires that have to go through the city right of way because there's an end user outside the city limits that they need to, naturally, geographically need to make their way through the city and continue on to provide their services in other locations. The law allows a city to require or be paid $5,000 per mile that a telecom company is running its wire through the right of way. The proposed rule amendment removes the mention of municipalities. So while it states that the state right of way will still have the benefit of seeking those payments, it's removing the word municipality and it's adding in a word that says fees. So basically, the state law says you are entitled to a rate. The proposed rules by the Georgia Department of Transportation has now stated that it would be a fee. So GMA came out recently and spoke to Rushi today, and I was able to get a glimpse at some of the other comments that were being submitted by cities that have already submitted their comments, basically opposing this. Not necessarily opposing it, I shouldn't say that, but adding comments to request that municipalities, the word municipality, be placed back into the rule so that we are clearly defined in there as having this right to seek out this compensation. And in addition to that, also placing the rule of rate in there so that we don't lose out of the idea that we can't do a rate is obviously different than a fee. A fee would be, we're running, wire through your city, here's $500 a year. That's the fee of the usage fee. The rate as currently defined is $5,000 a mile in urban areas, $1,000 in rural areas. So we obviously want the rate to be included into this rule amendment. I was able to, when I spoke to Rushi, obviously GMA has submitted their comments. The city of Winder has submitted comments. I believe he also provided Decatur's. So I have prepared a letter to be signed by the mayor, submitting essentially very similar comments to those that are being supported by GMA, and that those of other cities similarly situated, asking that the rule be amended to include these terms so that municipalities are not sort of left, in the dust, or that we remove that ability to charge that rate. I hope I explained that well, because it's kind of I don't know why we're not really sure why they're making this amendment, but I do believe that this is something that cities and counties throughout the state are probably going to come down pretty quickly and say, wait, you really need to take a look at this. And that's why GMA is seeking out multiple cities and counties to provide these comments.
So is that sort of the devil is in the detail, so to speak, and a lot of communities might not even realize this is coming on the road?
Yes, I mean, I think that's probably why. I mean, Rushi posted it to our listserv, and I'm going to share my screen if that's all right. To sort of encourage, hey, please take a look at this. We're sort of getting wind of it, and we would really like for everyone to submit comments so that they know and hear from us. So if you take a look, this is the letter that I've prepared. The proposed rule was put forth on July 15th, 2021. The original date, the closing date, was actually August 5th, which is tomorrow. They've extended that to August 16th to be voted on August 19th. So if you take a look at the second paragraph, since 2018, this law 46-5-1, and I don't want to bore everybody, but that is the one that is currently in place, stating that Georgia municipalities must receive due compensation from telephone companies which do not have retail end users. So those companies that are running cables through our city, not servicing our citizens, should be paying the city. It would only make sense to be paying since you're using and not providing a service. So that we can, the municipal rights of way at rates set by the Georgia DOT. So the proposed rule removes municipalities and replaces rate with a fee structure. That's just not what that would not be to the benefit of the city of Brunswick. So I go through, obviously there's constitutional, we're back to the Constitution on this item as well. I think it's to pull this away is sort of pulling away from the home rule power of the city. And it also could be considered an unconstitutional gratuity, because it would almost be as if the city is now being forced to allow telecommunication companies to use their property without compensation. That makes sense.
Mhm.
So if you have to take anything away, the city of Brunswick strongly, at the very end of this last paragraph, strongly encourages the board to consider revising the proposed chapter 672-11 to reimpose a rate for the use of rights of way, at least for municipal rights of way, as clearly intended by the Georgia General Assembly. So we just want it to stay as it is, go back to normal. I don't know why the changes are necessary, but that is what this letter is setting forth.
So question is, this is a proposed by the GDOT to the General Assembly next year, coming up in January, or what? Yes?
Well, it's that OCGA is not being, so our state laws are not being amended. The Georgia Department of Transportation is amending their own internal regulations. And in doing that, it's going to sort of gut the city's ability to seek out this rate from the telecom
Because we are hedging, it's dependent upon the Georgia Department of Transportation for us to receive our rate. That's what you're saying. Instead of us saying that that we're entitled to this rate, irregardless of Georgia DOT.
Right. So the Georgia law says a municipality is entitled to the rate set by the Georgia Department of Transportation.
Okay.
So now the Georgia Department of Transportation is changing it.
Changing there.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're saying, and for some reason, they're changing rate to fee, and I don't know if they've neglected to include municipalities specifically, or they believed that because it says state right of ways, they're saying, well, you're an agency of the state, so you're included therein. GMA, and I would agree, and I think most of the commission would probably agree, I think we need to be specifically identified as a municipality in that rule, and that the rate remain what it was prior.
Yes, I agree. I think broadband is driving some of this too as well. When
I think they're going to be running a lot of utilities through where they may not have end users. So they need
Yes.
to be able to get it through, and $1,000 a mile might be a little steep for them in rural
I
areas.
believe their lobbyists are really doing a good job.
I was about to say that it's a lobbyist in somebody's ear, and it's a shareholder in a broadband company somewhere.
Yeah, and actually, I don't think this is the first time that this has come up. I think
No, we've
I've
been-
heard them trying to change this before.
It was the last time we
session.
met in person. The last time we met in person at GMA's convention, so 2 years
Yes.
ago, is when we had to, if you guys remember, coming out of that, we had to pass that new ordinance that allowed the city to regulate its own
Yes.
right of ways. And that was a very difficult process for both the ACCG and GMA to get those groups to agree as to who has the ultimate use of the right of way, who owns it, who should be allowed to be compensated from it. I think that this is another, maybe it's yeah,
A backdoor way.
maybe.
It's another diet plan is what it is.
another
So
Hail
I am
Mary.
asking tonight, if you guys approve this item, you would be approving the submission of comments. And I would ask that if you do so, that the mayor be approved to sign the letter that I've prepared. I know you've been able to glance over it tonight, but it is substantially based on GMA's suggestions, the city of Winder's comments, and generally going through what this proposed rule is going to do. Or
I
could
have
do.
one question, and maybe this is just a needle in the haystack. Is there a differentiation between a fee and a rate as far as whether one is fixed or variable?
Yes. I mean, there's tons of case law out there that defines and looks at fees versus rates and how they relate to the municipal services that are provided by a city. Specifically, and it was part of the lawsuit that we had going on not too long ago, solid waste removal fees, are they, or is it a rate that you proportionally adjust to a person? So a fee would be like a uniform application, whereas a rate is an ongoing, basically in the eyes of the law, they are very different things.
Okay.
So when you have this amendment to this rule that states fee, and you have the Georgia law stating rate, it is a major disconnect.
Thank you.
All righty. So commissioners, there's a letter for my signature submitting comments in response to the Georgia DOT proposed rule 672-11-04. What's your will and pleasure?
Motion to submit as presented by our city attorney for your signature.
Second.
Motion second for the approval of submitting these comments to the GDOT for coming from out of the mayor's office. Are there any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposes? It appears ayes have it. That motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner
Mammy,
Whit-
I'll send you a copy of the letter if that's okay, because I'd like to get it out tomorrow if it's possible. And I'll send everybody a copy of the letter, obviously.
Please. Okay, we'll come to the end of our regular printed agenda. Is there any need for executive session
Yes, for litigation.
and also personnel?
Offer motion that we go into executive session for litigation and personnel.
Second.
Motion second for this commission to go into executive session for litigation and personnel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposers? Okay, all right, we will stand adjourned from our, we will postpone our adjournment of our city council meeting and go into executive session, after which we will come back and adjourn our regular council meeting. So from this moment on, we stand adjourned, we stand We will transfer into executive session. See you on the other side, everybody.
Okay.
No one could hear me then. We have returned from executive session and nothing but discussion have been made. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight and for us being vigilant to make sure we stay safe and continue to do that. Please be safe, everybody. The ones who are going to Savannah for our GMA conference, please be safe there too. The ones who are not, hopefully we can bring back some good things back to our commission. Is there anything else we need to bring before this commission before I ask for adjournment? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I entertain a second. I got a motion, I got a second for adjournment. Be safe out there. Understand where we are in this our society with this pandemic going on, but by all means, look after yourself and your family very, very closely. We stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I didn't say, oh, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposes, we don't care. We out of here.
Be
Thank
safe.
you. Be safe, everybody.